You made the film take a very dark turn.
180-degree dark turn.
Very grim ending. Very un-Hollywood ending.
Yeah.
And
some people really hate it.
Oh, it infuriated people. And yet Steve King said...
Steve King dug it.
He said if he had thought of it, he would have ended his story that way.
Yeah. Which is a big compliment. And by the way, I know he's not just being polite.
He doesn't say things like that.
He doesn't say things he doesn't mean. That's one thing I love about him. But
no, there's a no bullshit guy there.
There's a no bullshit clause in knowing Steve King, which is great.
Yeah.
We've been talking about doing this for the possibility of my doing this for a lot of years. I said, Steve, you know, it's the climate of this town right now is not such that we're going to get away with doing Night of the Living Dead today with a real kick you in the nuts kind of ending, and unless we do it really cheaply.
Right.
And he said, well, you know, I know we all had a deal, terms that provide money up front for us. If you're cutting your fee, I'll eliminate mine altogether. And
wow.
He said, you've been wanting to tell this story for, you know, 17 years or almost 20 years. And if all you're going to have to make it is $17 million, go out and make the best $17 million movie you can. Embrace it, go with it, and don't be afraid of it. And what a great blessing to have that kind of an attitude.
Do you think that that ending might have ultimately caused the film not to be as successful as it might have been otherwise?
Probably, but at the end of the day, you know, like I say, it can't all be, you know, it all can't be comfortable platitudes.
And thank goodness not all movie decisions are made on what the studio's going to like.
That's exactly right, or what the studio is second-guessing, you know, 6 months or a year in advance. The audience is going to feel by doing some perverse market research thing. You know, I mean, I have to credit Bob Weinstein for having the balls to read the script and say, I'd rather it was a happier ending, but I think it's a really good movie.
It's pretty gutsy.
Here's the 17, go make it. Just don't go over budget. And I killed myself to not go over budget and over schedule. We're skating on pennies. And you've made movies like that. You know what it's like, right?
More than my share.
I'm proud of the movie. It's weird. I have mixed feelings about it. It's a movie from a very angry guy.
Angry guys sometimes make the best movies.
We'll see how it holds up in the long run. You know, I know that the people who hate it really hate it. The people who love it really seem to love it.
Not a lot of middle ground.
No middle ground whatsoever, and I knew it was going to polarize audiences in that way.
When you were starting as a director, well, first you had done Buried Alive as a TV movie for USA.
Exactly.
After that, Shawshank was your first feature film, theatrical feature film. Your movies were very formalist, very educated film style. The language of film was very formal. And then The Majestic came along, and it's very much a Frank Capra kind of movie. You know, you drew
Still very formalized.
Very formalized.
In its way, yeah.
The Mist was a change in lots of ways for you, in a number of ways. First of all, because it was a monster movie, a 50s monster movie with a very millennial final act.
Yeah.
But also a lot of CG. And it didn't have the formal feel. It felt very immediate, a lot of handheld work. And did this come out of your work in television?
It did. And also, again, embracing the necessity of, if you want to make your movie, you get to do it, but you got to do it on a low budget and a really, really tight schedule. I mean, we shot that movie in 6 weeks, which is half the schedule I've ever dealt with before on a feature. Oh my God. We shot it in 36 days. Shawshank was 71 days. And
with lots of action and effects and CG and practical effects.
The K&B stuff. I mean, it was madness, and a huge ensemble cast. And I knew I was going to have to embrace that kind of approach to shooting. I'd only ever done one handheld shot in my other movies, just one.
Wow.
And it was an insert of Jim Carrey's hand trying to get a car door open. I mean, there's literally been one handheld shot.
This had to be liberation then.
It was like shucking off the clothes and jumping into a cool pond. It was great because the camera work was improvised in the moment. And I learned that lesson by going and doing an episode of The Shield for Sean Ryan, a show that I was crazy nuts in love with, a huge fan of. And And it's something it's a machine that by now is very well oiled. I went in and I got the idea like within half a day. It was, fundamentally, you block the scene and the cameras get in there and improvise. And they're either on a pogo stick or on a Steadicam or or it's handheld in some fashion. Maybe there's wheels on the pogo stick, but the guy's he's got complete freedom to do whatever. And the approach was thrilling because it was very documentary, very immediate, very in the moment, the kind of thing I had not ever done before. And I was so impressed with their work, that DP, those two cameramen, that I invited them on the hiatus to come do The Mist. So if you notice a little bit of tonal similarity between The Mist...
Oh, just a little.
...and an episode of The Shield, now you know why.
Yeah.
And the advantage is you can shoot really fast.
Right.
The disadvantage is every take from each of the two cameras is different. You wind up with reams of takes where nothing is the same, literally. The time you save on the set, you wind up putting into the editing room because you really need to find the best stuff that's there and figure out a way to cut it together.
And you don't have time to watch normally I would watch the dailies at the end of every day, but when you're shooting that way, you have to wait till you're done and trust your editor.
And then go back and really dig into it with your editor. And he was particularly great one too.
Yeah.
Certainly versed in this style, having worked on The Shield. It was liberating. I don't want to shoot every movie like that.
Yeah, it's right for that one.
It was the right choice for that. It was the right tool to apply to tell that story. And it was great to get out of your comfort zone and do something completely different.
There are cycles in Hollywood of remakes and sequels. And
let's talk about that.
You were a big part of that. We played in that sandbox in the 80s and 90s. So
yes and no. When we were starting out, that was a great way to for us to practice our craft and break into the business. And those things did happen. The remakes did happen. The sequels did happen, of course, obviously. I don't know what the hell's going on today because it seems like every movie that's announced is a remake or a reboot or a redux or a
And those are the big A pictures. Those are the $200 million movies.
But there's also that smaller budget thing, where they're cranking out for $20-30 million a remake of
Texas Chainsaw,
My Bloody Aorta, or whatever,
in 4D.
Yeah, and I guess it always was an economic mandate, wasn't it, from people?
But it was a small independent thing when we were doing it.
Now it's like, what are the 5 remakes we're going to do this year because that's our bread and butter of our company? And it's like, did The Hitcher ever need to be remade? It may in fact be a good movie on its own terms. I don't know, but the first one was, talk about one of the great movies in our genre of the 80s. Did it really need to be remade?
Well, all I can say is that Critters 2 was a story that had to be told.
I've always said so. I've always said so. I don't have a blanket condemnation for remakes,
The Fly, what a great movie.
The Fly, Cronenberg's The Fly, it's magnificent. It's a remake. So's John Carpenter's The Thing.
Fantastic movie.
It's a remake.
Yeah.
But I don't think they were remaking those just to get the DVD revenue. They were remaking those because you had filmmakers with vision who had felt like there was something more to say or something new to say. I got no problem with that. And in fact, some of our best loved films are remakes. The Maltese Falcon with Humphrey Bogart.
That's right.
Had been made twice before the definitive version happened. So you can't slam the idea of remaking things because then there is no growth. The tree doesn't branch out. Then you're not ever going to do Hamlet again because it was done once really well on stage. Okay, well, let's shut down that idea because that's a remake. No, there's some things some stories are so great we should tell them again. We should celebrate the idea of somebody like David Cronenberg saying, "Well, there's a hell of a lot more to say about this story than the Al Hedison version back in what was it, 58, which ain't a bad movie. I loved it when I was a kid. But boy, the Cronenberg thing is its own thing. It's a filmmaker's vision. It's a filmmaker's vision. John's movie, The Thing, was a filmmaker's
Could
vision.
only have been made by John Carpenter.
And only at that time.
And only at that time. And unsuccessfully at the time.
Unsuccessfully at the time. 82, the year that he came out, that little walking toadstool from Beyond the Stars buried John's movie.
Yeah.
Buried it.
Same studio.
Nobody wanted Mean Aliens. Everybody wanted E.T., which I totally understand because it's a great movie.
Absolutely.
You know? By the same token, I remember going with my friend who I mentioned, Greg Melton. He's my production designer these days. I remember going to a screening at on the Universal lot because we heard, ooh, The Thing is screening tonight. So we got onto the lot. I've had this experience with Greg a number of times. Scarface was the same thing. We went to Hollywood Boulevard, saw Scarface, and we realized we were in an audience of people who loathed this movie.
That's the best way to see him.
He and I we're loving it, and then the lights come up and we go, everybody's pissed. Is it me? I love the movie, right? Same thing with John's movie. I think people were so appalled by it. And there's Greg and I, and we've got the biggest stupid grins on our faces because we think this is an unbelievably great movie. This is a classic movie. It's funny how sometimes, you know, the ones that do have longevity are loathed when they're first seen. And then they feel like people kind of get used to the idea of it, and then they discover what's great about it. You know, that's a very interesting process when that happens.